Okay, so I think we can start and people can just file in whenever they are ready. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today for the Clean Energy and Climate Change Focus Group. This is going to be a big one, I know, specifically in terms of grant funding and funding for this master plan. There's a lot of interconnectivity here, and I'm excited to learn from all of you. I am just going to briefly introduce myself. My name is Fiona Coughlin. I'm a consultant with Barrett Planning Group who will be working with PVPC on the community engagement for this master plan. We ran the vision session and the focus groups and helped with the survey, and we'll also be doing an implementation workshop later on in the spring. So I look forward to seeing all of your faces again and working with you through this process. So I'm not sure if people are comfortable with going around and doing a quick round of introductions. I think most folks in town do know each other, but I wanted to just give folks a chance. I know Chief Wiedes is here. And is, but correct me if I'm wrong, relatively new to town. So, if you want to just take a moment to say hi, feel free.
Absolutely. Hi, everybody. Tammy Wiedes, Chief of Police for Chester and Blanford Police. Coming up on the end of my 5th week here. I have been a police officer in Chester Blanford for about 14 months. So I'm looking forward to working with everybody, and thank you for having me.
Great. Thanks so much. Joanne, did you want to introduce yourself briefly?
Joanne Martin, admin to the town administrator and select board, and I'm on the recreation committee, and I work for the town hall, and I'm a resident.
Awesome.
I already said that.
So all of the hats. Joanne is wearing all of the hats. It looks like we have somebody on the phone. I don't know your name, but please feel free to introduce yourself now if you're comfortable.
John Piper, Blanford Concom.
Oh, hi, John. Hi again.
Hello.
So today, our general approach to the focus groups has been kind of staying muted unless you're speaking, and you can using the raise your hand feature when you would like to speak, and using the chat. But it seems like we have kind of a smaller group today. So, I definitely don't mind as long as people are respectful of each other, that we can kind of speak openly and have a conductive discussion today. So I'm just going to stop sharing this screen. So I have a set of questions here for you that I'm just going to start off pretty general, just to kind of get an idea of where the community stands on these topics and what the trends are and what you're all seeing in your day-to-day. So I wanted to start by just asking you, how does Blanford's efforts toward climate change resiliency tie into the other elements in this master plan effort? So we've talked to transportation folks. We've talked to folks who are professionals, infrastructure and facilities professionals, folks who are, responsible for service delivery in town. And I just want to get an idea of what you're all thinking in terms of the interconnectivity of this chapter and the townwide operations at large, and how important this is for you all. Feel free to just kind of jump in and speak your mind when you are ready. And I might, if people are feeling shy, I might pick.
All right, just jumped on.
Hi, Josh. How's it going? So good. We just did a quick round of intros, and I just posed the first question, basically just asking how does Blanford's efforts toward climate change resiliency and adaptation tie into other elements of this master plan? Just giving some context that we've talked to a lot of different folks, transportation folks, facilities folks. And I just want to get an understanding from people on this call how important this topic is to them and how it needs to be prioritized and discussed in this plan. So
if I could just jump in then and start.
Sure.
This master plan in general is unique comparatively to other master plans because it has a twist on issues of climate change.
Right.
And being much more climate resilient, which I can appreciate because, and I've said this before in previous groups or in previous visiting sessions, because of Blanford's geographical position in the mountain, you know, we have departments that are consistently battling issues of climate change, and it impacts how we divert resources to better mitigate these issues so that we can keep up with how we provide services. So is going to be specifically focused on how we are more resilient and adapt to issues of climate change, so that we're not implementing any strategies that will later be be impacted with different weather events. So,
Right.
And because of the natural resources, the different reservoirs, and I hope
they do a wonderful job, but I don't think we're getting the response time, you know, because it is harder to come up here. We do have a lesser population. And I feel like sometimes we're a little forgotten up in the woods. But as far as, I mean, it was mentioned yesterday in a meeting that living up here, I think, is a conscious decision and choice, and people understand, you know, the risk benefit of living up here with having, you know, part-time resources as far as police, fire, EMS. So that is something that inherently they, you know, the people take on. And, you know, obviously we're doing our best to combat that. And, you know, we took the first step. We have a full-time chief now, police chief up here. So that, I mean, that's helpful. So I feel like we're working towards where we need to be going. But basically, I mean, yeah, I think just trying to get resources up here during a disaster. I haven't worked any other than this past fall. I think we had the big windstorm and the tornadoes that in the area and such. And we had trees down, and it was tough to get linemen up here. So that's really my experience as of this far.
Okay. Well, that's really informative, though, for me. I'm just getting an idea from your an idea of how, you know, I understand, and I've heard in previous groups that, yes, you know, living in Blandford, it's definitely a very intentional decision that folks make. They know where they're moving to, or they know where they live, and they understand the limitations. But, you know, in a state of emergency, and especially with the volume of seniors that live in Blandford, how do we kind of refocus our thinking and help them in a time of crises? So that is very interesting. Does anybody else have anything that they want to add or follow up with?
I just want to add to that with, you know, helping the seniors and such. I feel like the community, the communities up here, you know, I serve Chester and Blanford, and I know Huntington, Russell, they'd all be the same, is that we have something, our people come together because they realize that the resources, the full-time police, full-time fire, they're not there. So I feel like our community as a whole have taken on that role, if you will. So in an emergency, people are coming together. I've seen people out with their own chainsaws cutting trees out of the road. And I'm sure if like an evacuation situation occurred, I can see neighbors taking care of neighbors. So I feel like that is definitely a strength up in the hill towns, is we're going to take care of ourselves as best we can.
That's good to know that the community will rally and kind of mobilize to assist when needed. Okay, awesome. I'm just taking some notes as I go along, so that's why I'm looking down. Okay, anybody else? Anything they want to add?
John Piper. So I'm just going to agree with what Tammy said. When we had the ice storm, we hooked up with what's Margaret in charge of their Council on Aging. We specifically went out and checked on the whole list of people that were we got from Margaret, and it's pretty much just like what Tammy said. Everybody came together. We had people manning the phones. We had phone calls coming into the fire department. We'd go out. We went as, which is not our responsibility. We went in and drained their systems because there's no electricity to run any heat. They didn't have a wood stove. We drained their houses so their plumbing wouldn't freeze, like what happened in Texas there. We went around for, I missed 3 days of work just driving around, clearing roads so we could get emergency vehicles down them. The National Guard came in on second or third day, which was a huge help, just having all these bodies, which I drove them around in my personal truck, and we just cleared roads. That's all we did. So yes, the community, when the crap hits the fan, yes, everybody just kind of jumps in and everybody helps everybody else out, looks in on their neighbors, and literally just goes above and beyond and just helps out.
Yeah, that definitely seems like a characteristic of Blanford that we've seen, you know, that I've seen from working with folks in town. Like there's a lot of camaraderie and there's very a feeling of togetherness. I guess my follow-up to that would be if there is an over-reliance maybe on community members stepping up, that might, you know, I'm curious if there would be, if gaps would form because of that, and where, and you know, addressing like you know, God forbid, pick like a natural disaster that was very you know, very negatively impacting the town, and if people are used to maybe relying on that their neighbor or so to help, and then that neighbor is also kind of compromised for whatever reason, I'm curious to see what people have to say about that. You know, maybe an over reliance on your fellow townsfolk might be a little bit of an obstacle in a way in the case of an emergency. I'm curious what people think of that. I mean, it seems like their due diligence is done, as you mentioned, John, and as Chief mentioned, that there are, you know, the National Guard had come in, and there are a kind of a preset list and kind of checklist, if you will, for seniors to make sure that they're covered. But I'm just curious, you know, if with the current setup, the way things are, what gaps are glaring and you know, issues there.
John Piper here. So that ice storm was the biggest one that I've personally been involved in. And other than having a manpower shortage, just because there's so many miles of roads here, I thought everything went incredibly well. Like everybody was working together. We were in cahoots with the highway department, fire department was doing their thing, police were doing their. Everybody was in communication. I don't know that I would add anything to change it. It went, I thought, extremely well.
Oh, good. Well, that's good. Joanne, I saw you had your hand raised.
Yeah, my only comment is I'm sure everything went well. What we need to do now is how do we stop? What do we do about stopping these unusual climate what am I trying to say? Excessive large storms that are heading in. I know that the town deals with it. That's what they do. You know, bigger cities, you just sit there and you say, okay, I'm going to wait for them to come and clean up the road. Up here, you look outside, there's a tree in the road. You say, okay, get your chainsaw, go take care of it. That's all there is to it. But we have to deal with how do we slow this down? How do we reverse this terrible thing we've done to our planet?
Right. Yeah. Instead of having maybe a more, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to put words in anyone's mouth, but instead of having a kind of reactive stance on fixing the issues that result from these extreme weather events, making sure that we don't forget to make sure that we're changing our actions to stop them. So does anyone else want to add anything?
Yeah,
Josh, go ahead.
to Joanne's point, I think that's all part of the initiative across the Commonwealth when you're talking about the resources that are being deployed to communities to like things like green communities, right, to reduce
Right.
our carbon footprint or whatnot, which is probably a segue to a part of the conversation. But before getting into that, you had the question about gap.
Yeah.
I think that the existing infrastructure that we have now at Blanford, given its rural nature here in the hill towns, not just here, but also our surrounding neighbors, um, each of the communities do, how we responded to Piper's point, that's kind of part of our plan to meet those gaps. There's a combination of not just what we can do here internally, depending on the scope and nature of the issue, but also there's mutual aid, there's state resources. The state has their own plan on how they respond to smaller communities, which is great. One of the things that I do think we need to work on, and we've talked about, and we were gonna actually actively start getting involved with, except when COVID started, it kind of reprioritized everyone's time, but emergency management. When we hired our new chief, who's been great, discovered that Blanford, once upon a time, there was a regional emergency management effort that just kind of went stagnant for a while. So we talked about kind of restarting that so we can have, make sure that, I'm not an expert on emergency management, but apparently there's criteria that communities need to work on,
Right.
and meet to kind of help become an effective or have an effective emergency response plans to issues as they appear.
Yeah.
That's something that I think is going to be important, that we should definitely try to get started with
Yeah.
our neighboring towns. But nevertheless, when there are issues of emergencies, there are plans, both locally and regional plans, as well as local and state plans on how to respond to those issues as they appear, to help effectively meet those gaps
Right.
for those challenges that are there just because of its rural nature.
Right.
Unlike in cities where they have professional experts 24/7 on staff, we don't have that.
Right.
So we have different plans on how to respond to those issues as they appear because we don't have that 24/7 response team.
Right. And I know, in terms of planning efforts towards emergency preparedness and response and hazard mitigation and climate change adaptation, Blanford has already done, for a small community, Blanford's done a good amount of work so far. I mean, with their MVP grant, the workshop that was done in 2019, and also, as Josh mentioned, the Green Communities grant as well. So, and I know that there's specific criteria involved with that grant, and folks my general understanding, I'm not sure how, Josh, you interact with, the more of the specifics of the grant than me, but I know that like annually, if the state will send somebody out to kind of do an assessment and an evaluation of the needs. Maybe you can talk a little bit about the successes of the Green Communities grant for Blanford, or what you wish that the grant would cover that it doesn't.
So you made note of Blanford already have been proactive with hazard mitigation among other planning opportunities we've done. And I think that's just the result that Piper shared about community coming together, what we heard about the town being able to effectively meet gaps to ensure that we're meeting the needs of the population during emergency. I think that just proves that, this community has been to some degree very resilient. Thanks to the folks that step up into these leadership roles and have been actively involved in these different plans. And here we are now kind of still doing that, trying to look ahead to make sure that we're covering our bases, to make sure that we're able to continue to effectively mitigate these things. On the subject of green communities, we've just implemented our second round of funds. You know, we've the first round of grant funds. We've Catherine can probably speak better to this than I, but we've
Well,
changed.
the
changed
town's
all
been a
our-
leader. Yeah, and the town's
Yeah.
really completed all the plans that were for the municipal buildings, and then now is leading the communities that are part of the Gateway Regional School to get the Gateway Regional School included in Blandford's energy reduction plans. So now Blandford can actually bring funding to the Gateway Regional School to help conserve energy and save money for those buildings as well, and that fleet. So Blandford's really a leader among small communities with respect to, as you said, Fiona, with respect to becoming certified, but I mean, becoming certified, expending the initial grant in the first year, and then getting a competitive grant, expending that within 6 months, and then being able to apply for a third competitive grant within 3 years is quite unusual for any
Right.
community, let alone a small community.
Right.
So we've already have implemented more than $200,000 of dollars of conservation energy measures within our public buildings, from the retrofits to converting our lights to LED in each of our public buildings, to a better heating management system at the town hall, VHDs at the town hall, weatherization in each of our public buildings. Catherine, I don't know if you know the data off the top of your head, what we're saving in energy as well as cost. I have it written down and I reported on it several times, but it's not, but you know,
I would be impressed if you rattled that number off the top of your head. So. But
I think I know we're probably saving up to $20,000 to $30,000 a year. That I can remember.
yeah.
As far as energy conservation,
Okay.
there's definitely, we can anticipate a reduction in our energy use for sure.
Mhm.
And we're gearing up to apply for another round. The energy source was here the other day looking at town hall, trying to see if there's additional projects we can apply for. And they found some that we can potentially go after, and hopefully we can include the school district as well.
Oh, great. Okay.
To make sure that, you know, we're maximizing on our resources here to save energy.
Yeah. That's good. I mean, it's really cool that Blanford is almost like a regional leader. I'm curious if other communities have reached out to Blanford staff about how they can be more proactive in terms of, you know, this topic.
Well, the issue is capacity. So
Yeah.
Blanford has invested in their capacity, right? I'm a full-time TA here. Other communities don't have a full-time TA, although Chester is not a full 40 hours. I think she's at about 30 hours a week. And, you know, she's dealing with a series of her own challenges and staff capacity.
Mhm.
Here at Blanford, we've been able to manage with a combination of people stepping up and volunteering, and also being able to hire part-time help for certain departments.
Oh, good.
So it just all comes down to capacity. Luckily, like I said, in Blanford, the town's invested, and they're starting to see the results of their investment, which is great. Other communities, I would assume that capacity is the challenge for them to
Right.
be able to keep up with these projects.
Right. Okay. Okay. Does anyone else want to add anything?
I just wanted to say I apologize for being late, everybody. And I didn't know if you had gone through any of the recommendations from the Community Resilience Building Workshop Statement of Findings final report. Have you talked about any of those?
Not yet. No, it's been kind of general, like broad-based questions, again, and getting an idea of the priorities and kind of what the current gaps are in emergency response and you know, hazard mitigation. But happy to talk about that now, Catherine. That's a good topic to bring up. So I have
one thing that I was just wondering about was this recommendation for the Land's End neighborhood. That it's a single access neighborhood to identify a captain for emergency response and communications. Is anybody in this group familiar with that? And do you know if anything's happened with that? No? Okay.
good question.
Josh may be, but he had to step away for a second.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Any other specific recommendations, Catherine, we can talk about while we wait for Josh to come back?
Yeah. Well, there was, you know, at the Community Resilience Building Workshop, there was a lot of a discussion about the Council on Aging, and there was a recommendation for a marketing campaign to destigmatize the use of Council on Aging services and try to expand the Council on Aging to a broader population. That,
Mhm.
you know, in terms of social vulnerability, of course, older adults has been identified as a group that may, you know, need extra support. And so I was wondering if anything had moved on that recommendation. Joanne, maybe, do you know about that? No, okay.
No, I really don't. I wish Margaret had stepped back in here. I can probably get her in here if you want to talk about it.
Yeah, if she wants to. It just seemed like there was a pretty high priority put on.
I'll see if she's around.
Okay.
I don't know if John wants to weigh in on this. I know we talked a little bit about it, and also Tammy. This we scratched the surface of this before Catherine. So I don't know if John or Tammy want to add to that. And feel free to just speak freely. Okay.
I'm just an officer on the fire department. Dave Motter would be,
Okay.
he would obviously know more about it. I don't know of anything going on with it.
Okay. Okay.
I don't either. Having only been in this position 5 weeks, I have not heard
Mhm.
anything.
Okay. No problem. Just wanted to ask, make sure.
Another thing I was wondering about, I saw in the news, in the New York Times, that a big article about wood banks, you know, in terms of crisis for people who heat their homes with wood. And there was, I know it came up in Blandford in terms of resilience for individual homes, having a wood bank that people could know that where they could go to get wood if there was a shortage of wood. That's kind of a, you know, an innovative idea right now. Is that an idea that has gained any traction, or is there really a need for that? Does anybody have any input on that? No.
That's a good
Okay.
question. I would like to just kind of piggyback on that kind of general trends in clean energy that you're seeing. That would be, I know that there's obviously been a lot of movement and discussion around solar. And also I'm just curious to if folks have seen kind of burgeoning trends in, you know, alternative energy forms. I know that like obviously wood and lumber are like a huge a source of kind of biofuel. I don't know if there's other sources, particularly in terms of heating. Feel free to, you know, or maybe wind.
I know when
Hydropower.
we had some funding a couple last year, I guess, from the Nature Conservancy to explore the Transportation Climate Initiative, which is this
Mhm.
multi-state collaborative that Massachusetts has been leading.
Yes, yes.
To basically to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from transportation by putting a limit on the amount of oil that could be processed at oil processing plants. And if people want to exceed that, then they would pay into a fund, and that
Mhm.
fund would come back to the state. And we had a listening session in Blanford last year, and I was
Right.
really surprised when a bunch of people drove in with their electric vehicles, and there were 6 electric vehicles in the parking lot. And so it does seem like Blanford has some, you know, cutting edge individuals, at least, who are already have jumped on the electric vehicle bandwagon. So I'm wondering if there's any need for an electric vehicle charging station in the community. I mean, I know if you have an electric vehicle and you own a home, you can just plug in your garage.
Mhm.
But is that something that people have any interest in or concerns about?
Since I've been here, I've never heard anybody,
Talk that
not to
yeah,
say
okay.
that there might be an interest or a need. If we were to put one there, is it going to encourage folks to want to? I don't know if the need is there, I guess.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Specifically.
Yeah, it didn't seem like, I mean, I was saying, Josh, how impressed I was when we had that listening session for the Transportation Climate Initiative, and there were 6 electric vehicles in the parking lot. It was
There were?
surprising. Yeah, like Rick Barnard had one, and a bunch of other people who came to the meeting came in their electric vehicles.
Well, that's just your point. Like, it's not to say
Yeah.
that they don't exist. I'm sure people in town have them, but I don't think they have
They don't
the
need it. Right,
they
they
don't need a
plug them in at
public
home. Yeah,
at home.
exactly.
I mean, I know Beckett, I think, has one outside of their town hall. If we can have one and it'll help serve the purpose of the community, or if there's a need there that.
Do you have any municipal vehicles that are owned by the town that are not,
No.
emergency response? No, so it's not like you don't give the town
Not yet.
administrator a car or the building
No.
inspector.
Well, we have one, but it's a shared vehicle between departments. They just sign it out when they need it, and it's a
Oh, well, so
pickup. It's not
you could maybe get Green Communities funding or some other funding to make that an electric vehicle for the town, and then you would have an electric vehicle charging station at the town, as part of the leading by example thing with Green Communities.
Mhm.
So that could
Yeah.
be something we could look into.
Yeah,
Oh, I mean,
definitely. I mean, I
over
think
time.
this vehicle in particular has. I mean, it's a pickup's not green at all. But we can always, if there was interest in the future, depending on the availability of funding, we can repurpose this vehicle to, it could be for highway use. It can be for, if we ever decide to get a building and grounds keeper in each of our public spaces, it can be for that. And at that point, if we're still looking to get that shared vehicle, whatever vehicle it is, it should be electric for sure.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but I don't see that happening in the foreseeable future.
Okay.
Hi, Margaret, thanks for joining.
Hi, no
Hi,
problem.
I had a
Hello.
question about the Community Resilience Building Workshop. There was a lot of emphasis on the Council on Aging, and one thing in particular was a public information campaign to try to destigmatize use of the services and broaden the appeal. Do you know if anything's been done on that?
Not that I'm aware of. I know that the Council on Aging itself would really like to see the vehicle be used, not just for the seniors, but down the road also for younger people if they need a ride to work, but don't have licenses yet. We just don't really want to focus strictly on seniors. We'd like to see the intergenerational part of it. And I think it all really needs to wait until we're done with this pandemic, or, further down the road with the pandemic, and look at some grant monies so we could get a van that would hold more people, that would also have handicap accessibility. And I think I just heard Josh mention something about electric.
Yeah, and maybe it could be electric too. That would be great.
Yeah, if ours holds out that long.
Right.
Joanne is raising her hand.
I was just wondering, Catherine, what kind of negativity are you talking about? I have not heard anything. I'm not on Council on Aging. That's why I turned it over to Margaret. But what kind of negativity are you talking about?
And I don't know, Joanne, thanks for asking, because I unfortunately was not able to participate in the Community Resilience Building Workshop in Blandford, but and Ken wasn't either. It was other colleagues, but it shows up in the statement of findings, the final report, and what it says is conduct a marketing campaign to destigmatize the use of Council on Aging services and expand outreach to a broader population. So I don't think it's that there's criticism. I think it's just that people think that's not for me. That's for people who need it more, or that's for people who are really disabled. And to try to make it clear that it's for every senior, you don't have to have a difficulty. I think that's what they were thinking. And Margaret,
Thank you.
correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, no, you are correct in that a lot of our seniors don't want to be categorized as seniors. They don't want to receive our newsletter. They don't want to have birthday announcements or anything like that, just because they don't want to be labeled a senior. So, there is some of that going on. One negative comment that I did hear, and I'm not going to go into it too much, was that someone stated, if it, and this is in regards to the vehicle and us opening it up to younger people, if people can't afford to live up here, then they shouldn't even think about living up here. And I really took offense with that.
Mhm.
You know, I don't think that's what this town is about.
Right. Right.
Yeah,
Thanks,
thanks for
Margaret.
sharing that.
I want to pivot slightly there. You know, we're talking about seniors. I also want to make sure that we discuss, obviously we know that like in a state of emergency, seniors would be more vulnerable. What other populations in the community would be vulnerable in a state of emergency? Is disabled populations and seniors, of course, as we mentioned, but I know that I know that Blandford has a Mennonite community, as well as I'm not sure how the size of the native population, but I'm just curious. I'm trying to tease out what groups would need added assistance if, you know, God forbid, an emergency, climate emergency were to happen. No thoughts?
In the course of the community resilience building workshop, the emphasis really was on seniors. That was the main group that was identified.
Yeah.
And then
Okay.
that Land's End neighborhood, and that the Land's End neighborhood, because there's only one way out. So the idea was you need to
Right.
get a network of communication there so that everybody knows that, you know, if you have to get out fast, you got to have a way of making sure that people can get out. That's my understanding of that piece.
I mean, the data that PUC put together, first when we did our MVP workshop, and then second when we did the most recent Zoom workshop around, not the most recent, but when you shared all that that data, I think it was like our second meeting or something in this process.
Mhm.
What was it? 25% of our population is elderly. And
Yeah.
the data shows that it's the population has been aging, and it's aging pretty quickly. The population, oh my God, our elderly aging population is growing rapidly.
Right.
That's about 300 seniors, right, more or less.
Yeah.
And then I think there's a percentage of that were identified as a low income, or have been identified as handicap, or I forget the specific criteria or matrix that have been reported in the past that put them into this category. So yeah, it just raises that immediate, right? Like, wow, our senior population, according to demographics here, it is the most vulnerable,
Right.
comparatively to other demographics that show.
Right. And you're right, Josh. And Blandford seems to be aging, according to the data, a lot faster than surrounding communities and the Commonwealth at large. So, so yeah, definitely. I just wanted to make sure that there wasn't a specific group of folks that were vulnerable that we weren't discussing. So, well, thank you. So
Just to interrupt, I would say Josh hit the other group, because 25 years ago, we had a very small free and reduced lunch population in Blanford. That has grown significantly over the last 25 years, to the point that Chester School, where Blanford residents go, is entitled to free Title I lunches. So that free and reduced lunch, it would be a group that might need assistance in any kind of calamity, because they just don't have the resources. And
Right.
I think that probably percentage-wise almost as large as our elderly or aging population.
Okay, great. Thanks. That was David, right?
Yes.
Yes, thanks, David. Margaret, go ahead.
I was glad to see David back in here. There's just one point I'd like to bring up that I think maybe we could work together on, Dave, with the school system and our seniors to get more of a generational gap closed here. Maybe we could work up some kind of a program to work with the school kids and the seniors. You know, maybe they could share information about each other, the seniors, their history, their background. The school children could provide the seniors with information about how they do things now and their backgrounds, and kind of have an intergenerational program going.
That's a good idea, Margaret. And that I had been from independent research on our own. I had found my colleague had found that there's a Be Green program at the high school, and I'm not sure how successful that program is, how often the students from the high school are interacting with seniors. But it seems like a program like that that's already mindful of steps that need to be taken in terms of mitigating climate change exists, but how can we strengthen that? Maybe I'm not sure if anyone's heard of that program, or Margaret, if you've seen students from that program working with seniors in the past. But
Yeah.
That would be a great place to start because Be Green is fairly active. Not this year, of course, because of COVID, but they do a lot of work in the schools, but they're always looking for outreach opportunities in the towns.
Okay, awesome. Okay. All righty. Does anyone else want to add anything? Any ideas about how Blandford can maybe disseminate information and maybe work toward bridging kind of the generational gaps that exist?
The only one idea I have, and don't run with this yet, it's just an idea.
Okay.
We've talked about informally, have discussed, we have a marijuana cultivation project in the pipeline. And if that succeeds and, we've negotiated the community impact fee of 3%. And according to the preliminary numbers, now don't mark me on this and run with it because I don't want to put people's hopes up too much here.
Got it.
When they first originally shared their plan, 3% of their total income was averaging about, or was reporting out as about roughly $800,000. And, you can not only community impact around emergency management and, public safety, but also programs and education. So I remember the chair and I informally, when we were just kind of, having our brainstorming discussion on it, like what can we possibly do? We thought, wow, it'd be great if we can partner with the school district and run an after school program at the town hall building. And if listening to this, if we can incorporate, work with elderly residents and bridging that gap. So providing tutoring, programming and services, using a portion of this resource, that's an idea.
Awesome. Yeah, that is a great idea. Thanks, Josh.
But it all depends on the success of this project
Right.
that's going through their permitting review process, and if it comes to fruition, and depending on what they collect,
Right.
it's all tied up into that. But just thought
Right.
I'd share that's been talked about.
Great.
I wanted to add, so yesterday we had the transportation and public facilities focus group, and it talked about town governance as well. And I know that as Margaret had had suggested, the communication in town, and maybe others share this sentiment, can be improved. How it can be improved, obviously there are ways to explore that. And one idea that came up was like an all boards meeting. I don't know the last time Blanford had one, and I think the person on the call yesterday had suggested that there wasn't one for a while. But I think that, and this is maybe just a comment with regards to utilizing that format of the town government, being the important convener of those types of groups that work towards approving permits and approving budgets and whatnot. But yeah, that was brought up yesterday in the public services and infrastructure discussion.
Thanks, Ken.
I remember when I first started here, there were a series of challenges, but communication was one of them. And so considering the infrastructure as it stood when it comes to what we have for staff capacity, volunteers. A lot of folks have day jobs. A lot of folks work in the evening. What I ultimately concluded at that time was that an all boards meeting can be a challenge for a lot of folks. So what I did was instead met folks where they were as far as communication. So understanding, those that don't have electronic capability, there's a different way I communicate with them information that happens as far as their local government's concerned. Those that do, there's a method of communication we share with them. We do have a meeting with everybody when we're doing end of year things as it relates to transitioning from one fiscal year to the next. And even that is limited. So it's one of those damn if you do, damn if you don't. I mean, we have folks right now who are, feedback will get to me that there's too many focus groups and I'm just too involved and it's just a lot of work with this master planning process, right? But if you don't include them, well, how come we haven't heard from this person? So that civic engagement and communication is always a challenge. But obviously, to your point, Ken, we try to be mindful and making sure that if there is an area we can always be better, then let's do it. But just know that every time we do one thing, it becomes too much, and then there's all of a sudden another concern. So it's a hard gap to sometimes meet, but we mitigate as much as possible.
Thanks, Josh. Anyone else want to add anything? Because I am going to change direction slightly here, piggybacking off of the Ken's question. Mentioned, talking to other groups, and transportation kind of briefly was mentioned just there. And I'm obviously transportation is very interconnected with a lot of these other items in the master plan. And I'm curious, in terms of climate change, adaptation and resiliency building and sustainability, how I know that Blandford at this time is not a complete streets community. And I'm curious to see if that would be something that the town would be interested in pursuing. Complete Streets is a program that's very popular across the Commonwealth that promotes accessibility, walkability, and kind of a universal design approach to street infrastructure. And it's been very well received in a lot of places. And I'm curious to see if Blandford is one of those towns that would think about adopting that. And I'm going to put a link to some information about.
And I can just add in the specifics. If the town adopts a complete streets policy that's approved by the state, then the town can apply for up to $400,000 each year for pedestrian and bicycle enhancements to the existing streetway network. So there's no reason not to do it, because it makes you eligible for money that you're not eligible for now.
Right. This was a topic that in a couple of the other groups, a lot of participants were very curious to learn more about. So I wanted to make sure that I brought it up here because of its obvious relevance.
So John Piper here. Is that the discussion about these streets, and it doesn't apply here. We have like one main road and with some side roads off of it. I don't know where you're going to ride your bicycle to. You're just going for a ride. There's no place to ride it to. These questions are like, they're not about Blandford. These have to be bigger towns where this comes from. You're not going to ride your bike anywhere or go walking anywhere. You're just going to go for a walk and then you're going to come back. They really just, a lot of these questions just don't even apply.
John, they don't apply today, but that's what we're working on.
Well, to Piper's point though, I think, so I had that same general feeling that Piper did until we did the walking map. When we started working on the walking map, it opened up my eyes on how walkable Blanford actually is, particularly in the town center area and the surrounding neighborhoods. And, there's a loop in Watson Park. There's a loop that is, there's a couple of loops that connect in and around Watson Park. When you go into
So
some
Josh,
of the neighborhoods,
you can
Taylor
just
Drive.
take a walk. Just take a walk. There doesn't need to be a plan. There doesn't need to be a map. It's like, then just take a walk. You can just
I'm not talking
walk
about
in the
the map.
woods.
I'm talking about the bike lanes and the walkway so that people can safely get to destinations like Watson Park or Town Center, to the library, to the grocery store here. Yeah, further areas where you're deep, where there's dirt roads, sure. To Piper's point, but there's other cluster neighborhoods around the town center area that can be better interconnected, where folks can safely walk and ride their bikes. We have the sidewalk, but not all our side roads have sidewalk. And if whether or not there's even an opportunity to put a sidewalk, that's another question because of the size and the legal standards roads need to be and whatnot. But certainly when we were doing the walking map, it opened up that dialogue and it opened my eyes a little bit to the potential of how we can make Blanford a walkable and bikeable, make it
It's
safer.
walkable and bikeable now, Josh. When's the last time a pedestrian or a cyclist got hit? It's just, we don't have an issue with that. It's not, we don't have this large population that's walking or riding, or we don't have accidents with them. If you want to ride your bike, you just go ride your bike. If you want to walk, you
counter
go for a
argument to
walk.
that. The counter argument to that, Piper, is you probably don't see it because people are afraid to and don't do it. There are people that
I think you're grasping at there. Somebody's afraid to go for a walk or a bike ride. It's like, dude,
I think
the
argument counters here.
Yeah.
I could say I think you're grasping too, Piper. It goes both ways here.
I just want to also recognize that. So David has raised his hand and also Margaret has raised her hand. David, I saw David first. Sorry, Margaret. So Dave, go ahead. David, sorry, go ahead.
No, that's fine. So I think the idea of doing some maps or some walks and the potential for connecting some of these things like Watson Park and the fairgrounds and the White Church in the center of town, as well as connecting to the middle conservation area, makes a lot of sense because not everyone knows what is available in town. And as I said yesterday at one of the meetings, there's also a potential for some large, much longer hikes. If we could just open up the Springford Water Works area in the reservoir, because there's a lot of wood roads through there that we aren't able to use anymore without being, getting in some sort of trouble. And the same with bicycle, cycling you can do, but again, where do you go? And if you're not familiar with the area, and if we're trying to get people to visit or consider moving up here, the more that we can show that there's opportunities for recreation and that the town supports that, I think the better opportunity we'll have to have young families and even retirees move into town. Thank you.
Thank you. Margaret, go ahead.
Getting back to the discussion that Josh and John Piper were having, John, just because it hasn't happened yet doesn't mean there have been close calls. There are members of my board who have actually had to jump off the side of the road for fear that this car was going to hit them. And we're talking North Street, we're talking North Blanford Road, we're talking Gore Road. If we could have sidewalks so that people would be safer to walk on them, on those roads, and some of them connect, like Gore Road connects to North Blanford Road, which would be a wonderful walking or biking area for anybody, but people are genuinely afraid of being hit by a car. So I don't think it's anything to take lightly.
How are you?
And also the implications of the safety obviously is very, very important, and accessibility, especially for folks who have trouble with mobility, but also the widespread implications of being able to walk and bike, less reliance on a car,
Right.
and just that it kind of has a lot of different implications to it. And John, I do see, I get where you're coming from in a way, but also, as Margaret said, just because it hasn't happened yet doesn't mean that about that topic, just because it is so connected to this discussion, and other discussions that we're having. Anything further before I move on? No? Okay, so I am going to change the topic ever so slightly, to talk more specifically about clean energy in town. Can we talk about challenges that Blanford has faced when trying to implement clean energy usage? And I don't know if Ken or Catherine wants to know about more specifics, and feel free to just jump in. Anyone
Well,
off the top of their head have any
I-
know of any challenges?
I think it's more of a comment with regards to the ability of the town and the planning board that has reviewed over 6 solar projects in
Mhm.
town. I think it goes to the discussion about open space. So here's this overlap about, the idea that you're trying to preserve land, and have that land be productive as it can.
Mhm.
But at the same time, this balance of solar development and clean energy and what that does for the town.
Right.
And if it does anything for the town through pilot agreements or other types of benefits the town gets from solar developers putting their arrays on town property or on town land.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that's just a comment with regards to at least the challenges of balancing, this want of clean energy and exploring solar use and wind use. I think it was in Russell where there was this conversation about wind, and I don't know if they've gotten their structure built, but
Mhm.
yeah, it's the idea that you're preserving the land that's most productive for whatever, but at the same time being mindful of both the green communities designation and this want to be supporter of clean energy.
Right. Yeah. And I've noticed that, just from the visioning session and discussions thus far, that it really is kind of a split. I don't want to say a split, but I can't think of a better word. It's obviously open space preservation is such a high priority in town, and also there is land available for clean energy, which is also so important and is a priority as we've seen through all of the work. Blanford seems to be a very active regional player in terms of this topic specifically. So I'm curious to get people's thoughts about about solar energy and its the influx of applications, and kind of maybe an idea of like the communities, a little bit more of an understanding of the community's thoughts from you all, if you have any. Okay. Okay, so I wanted to talk about, from there, maybe talking about in terms of, we've obviously,
I was working
yeah,
on my
go ahead.
thing here. Just
Oh, it's fine.
the feedback I'm getting is no one up here is thrilled with these solar
Okay.
projects. It's obviously, it's great that we're doing what we can in the Commonwealth to reduce, carbon footprint or whatnot. But
Mhm.
besides the pilot payments, to the amount of trees that are being torn down to support these solar farms, it's not in
Yeah.
line with what folks in Blanford want to see their community to be.
Okay.
I think what we have now is, okay, we have it, it's there, it's built, we've gone through it. I don't think I'm getting a feeling that the townspeople want to see any more solar development happen in Blanford. I think we're doing our part. They can go to another community and continue to contribute to the Commonwealth's goals on green energy when it comes to these solar projects.
Gotcha.
I don't know if I'm capturing that right, if others think otherwise, or if I'm wrong. And I see Dave's hand is up. I'm not sure if it's related to solar, but that's the feedback I'm getting.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. David, go
So,
ahead.
I would tend to agree with Josh. We do have a lot of large scale solar development. I think most of us don't see that as being particularly helpful to the towns other than in pilot payments. So we see these solar developments going in and the solar energy being shipped out, so to speak.
Right.
It would be really helpful if we had some sort of a way to provide solar credits for people in town, whether it's small scale solar developments that are undertaken or underwritten by the state or the local government, because it's fairly expensive to put solar into your own house and become solar efficient. And that also relates back to electric cars, because if you have your own solar collector, you can essentially get free electricity for your cars, except for the fact that, you know, a fairly decent sized solar collection for a house is going to be $15,000 to $25,000, and you know, most people don't have that kind of spare change. You do make that money back over the course of 5 or 10 years.
Right. Yeah. And that's a huge financial burden that for many just not feasible. Thanks, David. Anyone else have any thoughts about solar? Want to weigh in? Okay.
Fiona.
Okay.
can
Yeah. I
just
mean,
raise,
it's, go ahead.
there is, for David's point about the cost of solar, there is an initiative from the Commonwealth called Solarize, where the Commonwealth, the Clean Energy Center, works with municipalities to help you secure a vendor who agrees to a, you know, reduced price based on the number of people that you can, it's basically, you know, aggregation. If you can bring us 10 customers, we'll charge you this amount. If you bring us 20, you know, we'll give you a discount. If you bring us 30, you get less and less. So do you think there would be any interest in the town maybe reaching out to, you know, like the same school, the same towns that use the Gateway School, or, you know, trying to get a couple of communities nearby to maybe do the Solarize, where, again, if you got, just as I said, you know, 20 people, you'd get a much lower rate than you would if there was just one person. Do you think there would be any interest in that?
That's a good question.
There may be, and I wish we had been able to work with the 6 towns earlier, because Gateway was one of several off-takers of solar energy from a project up, I think it's in Whately. And that would have been a great place to share that with 6 towns, but we had that opportunity. It was really aimed at municipalities, and we took an opportunity for that because we saved, as Josh said about the town, we saved a considerable amount of money in energy costs. But I think that depends on, you know, the cost of people. I, for example, wouldn't be, because I spent a lot of money to put solar on the farm, and we're completely cut off from needing energy. But I think it's a great idea.
Good, thanks.
Awesome. Okay. So maybe stepping back from the solar conversation and not focusing so much on solar specifically, but I want to ask folks on this call, I guess from a zoomed out lens, like, I guess, where are the most significant energy needs in town? You know, maybe like where are the gaps there in service? Is it clean energy for heating your home? Like what are the needs? You know, solar is obviously, we've touched upon that, but maybe just thinking separately from that for a moment. And yeah,
Well,
no, again, I know that like Ken and Catherine. Sorry, David, go ahead. I cut you off.
The only truly clean heating source for your house is renewable energy through some sort of heat exchanger outside because you're burning carbon fuels.
Mm-hmm.
And so that goes back to either
Right.
solar or wind generation.
Right.
And again, the
How
cost
about
of
wind?
installing a heat pump or a heat pump with wells is fairly significant.
Okay. Thanks, David. How about wind? Is that a conversation that Blanford is even, wants to be a part of, or is considering it all? And apologies again, Catherine and Ken, if I'm, talking about something that ignorantly, I'm sure that you both have more technical know-how and what's the kind of the trends in wind energy that are going on in your part of the state. So feel free to jump in if I'm sounding silly, but.
I would say, given the pushback about the two windmills in Russell, but I'm not sure that's that's a positive source of energy for the hill towns. The whole idea of breaking up your views and putting windmills in, and all the pushback we got when there was a talk about putting windmill at the turnpike exit or a turnpike service area here in town got a lot of pushback from town residents.
Thanks. I did not know that there had been pushback in Russell about that topic. So thanks, David. Okay, interesting. In terms of goals and where, the direction that you see Blanford moving in over the next 10 years of the course of this plan in terms of clean energy usage, what would you all ideally like to see? The community better than anybody else and what's feasible and what and the community attitudes, which seem to, understandably so, have a large impact on decision making. So I'm just, trying to get an understanding of, feasibility of clean energy initiatives in town and what people would be on board with and want to see. Any thoughts? I know it's a very niche, specific topic, so sometimes it's, it gets very technical. But okay, all right. So, what time are we at now? So we have about 15 more minutes. So I just wanted to ask you all. I know that we've. Climate change and clean energy are the main focuses here, but I want to jump back in very, very quickly to hazard mitigation and efforts around that. I wanted to just ask you all about, there was a specific priorities that were outlined in that workshop that we talked about earlier, the vulnerability report. And I just wanted to kind of not, list them off one by one, but kind of just ask you your thoughts about, what you all think about this. So areas in the report that were a cause for concern, listed as a cause for concern, were pole-based electricity and community lines, pole-based electricity and communication lines. That was not something that we've talked about yet, and I'm curious to see what you all think of that topic, and if you think that it's an area for concern, especially in the event of an emergency. That can be very problematic in an extreme weather event. So, even based on what you've seen in the past or recently, issues around those specific utilities and that infrastructure. Any thoughts? Oh, you guys are so quiet.
Yeah, I have.
So John Piper here.
Sure, go ahead, John.
It would be great if we could get all the power lines underground. That would be awesome. But Blanford, again, it's a giant rock with some dirt on it. If we're going to be able to put that in the ground, we ought to be. Let's put the water line. Let's get the water line all over town. There's you're not going to dig it up like in Westfield. There's ledge everywhere. And it's unrealistic that that's ever going to happen. It would be wonderful. You wouldn't have any more down lines from windstorms, tornadoes, anything like that. It would be great.
Right.
Just face it, it's not going to happen.
Sure. Tammy, I think I saw your hand raised.
Yes, you did.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say similar, but I'd love to see the lines go underground.
Mhm.
And if we can't go underground, then I know in some states they go high and
Yeah.
they're higher than the tree line. And I think the issue in Blanford, and all the hill towns really, is the amount of trees that we
Yeah.
have in and around the lines. And I know the, Eversource and Aspen, all them, they're doing a great job in trimming them, but I think it's a losing battle. I don't think it's something that could ever be won doing it the way they do it. Just
Okay.
because the amount of work. So I would say if we can't go underground, then why can't we go higher?
Interesting. Yeah. Interesting. Is that
So
something?
Tammy,
Go ahead.
just to rebut Tammy's thing. So again, this comes back to the scenic and open space. And she's got a point. I don't know if I would describe it as a losing battle, but more of an ongoing battle. It's never going to go away. The trees keep growing. You got to keep coming back and trimming it. They were just here, and we had one hell of a windstorm, and I didn't hear of any lines down in Blanford, but Huntington, Chester, don't know if they clean those lines. So, I mean, it works for a while, but eventually, they're going to grow back and they're going to pull lines down. So if we extend them higher, you're talking about swapping all of the poles out. And now they're going to be visible from any of these scenic views. And, it's a solution to the problem. Don't know if it's, what's it going to cost? Don't know that we're any better off, to swap out all the poles and raise it up. And, and just being, again, devil's advocate, not saying what I believe in or not, but.
Yeah, that's a good point, John. Yeah, Tammy, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I mean, obviously anything that we do from here on out, we have a structure that is set right now. And obviously the most cost effective, in my opinion, is to keep doing what we're doing and keep maintaining like we are. But I think that the purpose of this, conversation is let's have some new ideas. Yes, it's going to cost money, but is it, it doesn't mean we have to do the whole town a certain way or that we have to do the whole town all at once. But I think if we could start going underground or start going higher with the poles, it's going to alleviate the loss of electricity. It's going to, we're not going to have the loss of, all the tree crews coming out and the trees on the lines. And so I understand that's may not be cost effective right now, but I think in the long run, I think it's a great idea. And I just wanted to say the reason I was bringing up these ideas is just because that's what we're doing here.
Yeah.
So
No, that's
to add there, so yeah, and Eversource, they have this whole, it's all risk management currently until there's some other innovative ideas that Tammy and Piper are talking about. But currently, Joe Mitchell is our governing liaison at Eversource, who I guess I'll give you his contact later. He'd be a good guy to pull into these work groups in the near future, perhaps, and they can share they have a much more short and longer term vision plan as far as their, mitigation efforts with trees around wires are concerned. And then also we don't have our own tree plan as well. So it'd be great if, as we continue to do risk management on these issues, that we also work on our own. We do have a tree warden, but we never really drafted a plan that we can divert resources to support, to kind of help contribute to navigating this particular issue. But to Tammy's point there, there's that basic risk management effort that we can do that's been going on. We can do better.
Right.
But if there were other better, more innovative ideas, You know, let's hear it, and let's do what we can. If it's feasible, let's try it out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thanks, Josh, for that. Yeah, that's a good point. Tammy, I also wanted to just I know we only have about 10 minutes left, and I want to get your feedback on a little bit more things. You said that managing, risk management and the trees were a priority of the department right now. What other things is your department focusing on at the moment in terms of environmentally specific things, maybe that we didn't talk about that really should be brought to the attention of the group? I'm curious.
I know highway's done a lot of canopy work to keep roads dry. Randy's not here, and I'm sure he could probably have been able to talk more about that. The other thing highway is exploring, and I know I'm probably going to describe this wrong, other alternative methods to treat roads.
Okay.
I have it written down, and I can probably email it to you later, but rather than the traditional salt and sand method, something more environmentally friendly.
Cool.
So those are some of the existing, a combination of, tree canopy work that's actually actively happening, but also looking into and planning for this environmental friendly idea of how we treat roads.
Awesome. Good. That's a great idea. Tammy, did your department have any other kind of things that they were working specifically on that we didn't talk about yet?
No.
Okay.
I just wanted to say that we are helping. The last police cruiser that we bought is a hybrid.
Cool.
And in my opinion, we're going to continue on that road with the hybrid. So, but no, nothing specifically.
Okay. And I don't know if this is this specific group, Josh, you probably know a lot more of that, the ins and outs of what they're doing at the moment, but I know that there's an emergency management committee in town. I believe it's a 4-person committee at this time. Correct me if I'm wrong. I know the police.
We have an emergency, right? So there's a there's our internal emergency management group, which is really advisory. It's not an official.
Okay.
Remember I described earlier what we learned was to meet our emergency management criteria, we're part of a regional effort.
Yeah.
So that's the official emergency management team, but we do have, our police chief, the fire chief, myself, the chair of the Board of Health, where we kind of consider ourselves as the internal, within town borders emergency management team. But again, I think that there's statutes on how to meet an actual emergency management. There's an official way to do it. I think we're part of a regional effort.
Okay.
And that's something the fire chief has been actively looking into. And we were gonna kick it off and get it going again, except COVID started and it just kind of, we were focused more on Blanford rather than what's happening regionally. Although, we should have probably, these issues don't have borders, right?
Right.
We should be having more regional discussions on these issues. But anyways,
yeah,
we do have
an
management team.
Yeah, and COVID kind of turned everything on its head at the time. So just kind of picking back up where, the track that the town and the region was on and picking back up from there is definitely next step. So
John Piper, subject I wouldn't mind talking about it. And Tammy, please feel free to jump in on this. So we have a bit of a problem with communications being so hilly, and Blanford or the police are on a different wavelength than we are. We have these large dead zones where there is no communicating, and it can come down to a safety issue. And I'm not going to tell you I got the answers for this one, whether it's put in more repeaters. There was a thing thrown around about having a repeater on every other pole when the high-speed internet goes through so that there won't be any dead zones. but talk about a safety issue. That's huge for police and fire.
Good point, John.
Yeah, I'll just add that currently, the police department, we do not communicate with the same dispatch center that the fire department does. We are moving away from the dispatch center, and the fire department eventually as well is going to be going to another dispatch center where we have service almost everywhere in the town. I don't know of too many spots where we don't. So that is in the works, and we are trying to fix that problem.
And didn't we recently?
Murphy's Law dictates that you're going to be in the dead zone where however small, you're going to be in the dead zone when you need it most. Anyway, I just threw that out there because it was, that's a real, being on the fire department, that's a real safety problem. And yes, we are supposed to switch over to Northampton Dispatch, but I have no idea when that's going to happen.
Okay. Thanks, John.
Didn't we recently invest to Piper on some repeaters there that got feedback that it's improved? Certainly, we still got more work to do, but that it's gotten a little better.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's gotten a little better. Can you, Josh, answer, are they still looking at, with the high-speed internet, getting repeaters on every pole or every other pole? Is that still something that they're considering?
I honestly, it's the first time I heard of that. Tammy, do you know?
No,
No.
I have not heard that.
Okay. All right.
I'll
So,
look into it, Piper.
sorry, Josh.
Thank you.
So we have only, a few, like 3 minutes left. So I just wanted to make sure that they wanted to add, please feel free, or if there's anything that you wish I asked that I didn't, or a topic that's really important that we didn't talk about, let me know. Or forever hold your peace. Okay, so, all right. So with that, I think that we did a good job today in covering a big, wide-ranging topic, and I understand that it's a lot to go over, and I really appreciate you all taking the time to speak to us and giving us your afternoon. Really, really appreciate it, and please feel free to reach out to me. I'll put my email in the chat. Sorry, 1 second. Feel free to email me with any follow-up questions you have or any more information that you'd like. And I can also, I have an electronic version of the questions that I can distribute if you know somebody who couldn't make this call today that would really, their feedback would be important to this. I'm more than happy to send that. Oh, Josh, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Is Catherine still on the line? Yes. Catherine. Hey, Catherine, Green Communities, the deadline application, I guess, is when? The 15th of March? Or if not later? You're muted.
I believe it's April 3rd, but I can check.
Oh,
I'll look it up.
So two things. One, I guess we're looking into, putting another competitive round, and not sure if there's going to be additional projects within town borders, but also number two, has there been any progress in connecting with, we have the super here on the line with us, connecting with Gateway Regional School District and seeing if they're going to be included in this application round?
Yes, we just finished, we're just finishing revising Blanford's energy reduction plan to include the Gateway schools. So we were going to send out the revised plan. We just need to get I need to connect with, I believe it's Stephanie, the person who does who got the energy efficiency audits at Gateway. So we just need to integrate that data into the energy reduction plan. But yeah, we should be able to have that revised energy reduction plan adopted by the select board and the school district or the school board. And that way the town can apply for projects at the school in addition to at the municipal buildings for this round.
So Wegner from Energy Source had sent you and I an email just kind of following up with the school district. So if I know Stephanie was working with somebody, I don't know if there's a way that we can bring in Daniel from Energy Source into the fold and kind of get some sort of, I don't know if it's a collaboration or a second eye on potential projects just to confirm.
Yeah, let's have, I'll reach out to everybody to schedule a Zoom meeting next week where we can all just at least get on a Zoom together to lay out whatever details.
Okay.
And we'll get Mark Rabinski
Sounds
in
good.
too to make sure that, yeah, you can apply.
Perfect.
Awesome.
Thanks, Fiona,
Well,
for the great meeting.
Thank you, Fiona. Thanks, everybody.
No problem. Thanks, everybody. We really appreciate it, and we'll be in touch. Thank you very much.